Hey GM, I got a little bit of an unconventional character concept I want to throw your way. Oh yeah? What did you have in mind? I'd like to play a lizard-folk alchemist if that's okay with you. Sure, but that's pretty suboptimal. You sure you want to do that? Hello, team players. Have you ever wondered if you needed to play a completely optimal character in order to be effective in Pathfinder 2nd Edition? Well, the answer to that question is no. And in today's video, I'd like to give you some tips for playing suboptimal characters in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. My first tip is to try to find options that don't use your main stat at all. For example, if you're playing something like a lizardfolk alchemist, then throwing bombs doesn't require your intelligence at all. And some bombs, like dread amples or bottled lightnings, inflict conditions on a hit with no saving throw. And because of that, you don't even really need to take the debilitating bomb line of feats. Will you get less alchemical items because you're a lizard folk? Yes. Your class DC will also suffer, but there are ways around it. Throw in some mutagens to help you in melee and ranged combat as well as out of combat, and you've got a very interesting character that you could definitely play. My second tip is to rely on buffs and debuffs from your allies. Your spell attack rolls and DCs and even regular attack rolls might not be as high as they could be, but getting your allies to cast something like Fear, Heroism, or making a foe off guard can really make up for that, especially if you combine those together. And those of you that are building optimally, think about what your other party members can do and how you can help them out, rather than just yourself. My third tip is to use that recall knowledge. Every single enemy you will face has some sort of weakness. And while elemental damage is actually pretty uncommon as a weakness, every enemy has at least one low defense, whether it's their armor class or one of their saving throws. And recall knowledge can tell you exactly which of those defenses to target. It does not matter if you're a martial or a spellcaster. Every class in Pathfinder 2e can target every saving throw. Obviously, some classes are better at targeting different saving throws than others. For example, a bard will definitely have an easy time targeting the opponent's will save, whereas a primal caster will probably not. But the primal caster will have a much easier time targeting their reflex save. And of course, strength-based martials will have an easy time targeting their reflex or fortitude save, as well as, of course, their armor class. But will have a hard time targeting their will save, especially if they're not trained in intimidation. But if you build your party right, then somebody should be able to target whatever their lowest defense is. Maybe even more than one person. But you only find out what their lowest save is, either through trial and error, or a much easier way is recall knowledge. So even if your spell attack roll or your DC or your attack rolls or even your athletics checks are lower than they could be, if you target the right save, it shouldn't matter. At least not as much as you think it will. Tip number 4 is to try to use your options in creative ways. For example, if you want to play a centaur sorcerer, think about taking the aberrant bloodline for the tentacular limbs focus spell. Well, most people will probably use that focus spell to give their touch spells a 20-foot reach. You can also use it to give your unarmed attacks a 20-foot reach. Which means, and I know this sounds incredibly weird and shouldn't work, but it does, you can give your hooves a 20-foot reach if you take the Iron Hoof Centaur Heritage, which personally I think would be a very fun way to use a centaur. And you can still use the spell to deliver touch spells if you want. That's the crazy part. And that's just one of the many ways that you can use your options creatively. And my final tip for this video is use archetypes to shore up your weaknesses. For example, maybe you want to take the Sentinel archetype on your spellcaster so they can be in melee. Because if you become trained in armor, you can still cast spells, unlike in Pathfinder 1st Edition. And if you're a lower strength martial, maybe you want to take something like martial artist or even dual weapon warrior to help you with your damage. There are so many archetypes in Pathfinder 2nd Edition that you'll find something to shore up your weakness. But you may have to ask your GM whether they'll allow legacy content. And those are my 5 tips for suboptimal characters in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. You don't need to have perfect stats in order to build an effective character in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. You don't even need to take the quote-unquote right feats. Will you have a better character if you do? Of course. You'll have more options to work with at that point. But that does not mean you do not have options if you don't. You just have to be a lot more strategic about it if you want to play that type of character and rely on your teammates more. I truly believe that you can play whatever you want and still be effective as long as you're strategic about it, which is why the focus of this channel has changed slightly. From now on, I'm going to be rolling completely randomly for builds. That includes ancestry, heritage, class, and subclass. Unless, of course, new content comes out. You can build optimally for anything. You guys can check out my new shorts if you want to see me actually roll for these. In the meantime, though, if you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like. And do other YouTube stuff. And of course, you guys can check out the links in the description below for my Patreon, my Discord, and my social media. And if you guys want to check out my first random teamwork build, you can check it out right here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, teamwork is vital. It helps us solve problems.